What's up, everybody? Jim here with Oscar winner Michael Douglas, Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige, and Ant-Man director Peyton. We're going to be talking about Ant-Man, obviously, and some larger Marvel stuff, but let's dive right into it. Michael, I distinctly remember watching an interview with you. I think it was maybe Larry King or something. And you said that you weren't really like a fan of science fiction, not really something that was kind of on your to-do list of things that you wanted to tackle someday. Obviously, Ant-Man has some science fiction elements, and sci-fi is no stranger to the MCU. So what was it about this particular project that made you want to, embrace something that otherwise hadn't really interested you?
Well, my whole career has been just contemporary movies, just contemporary, whole career. And you notice I didn't say effects pictures because I loved, and quite honestly, it's not in the Marvel world, but Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito are good friends of mine, and I was kind of jealous when I watched them go through the Penguin and the Joker syndrome, and said, well, nobody's come to me yet, So I was very appreciative when Kevin brought this up, and it's an opportunity to do something that was totally out of my wheelhouse, and a chance to really learn about effects movies and how they put them together. So it was really a treat. And then I dove into this Marvel world, because it's not often that you get not only the script delivered to you, but about 2 years of Ant-Man comics that gave me more of a depth about Hank Pym than just about any character I've done in other pictures. So they talk about being, superhero comic book characters, but they have a tremendous amount of depth.
Now, I also remember, probably from the same interview, you had referred to some of your most iconic roles as Prince of Darkness characters.
Right.
But one of the first things I remember you from was Romancing the Stone.
Right.
And I love that movie. And I have to wonder,
Absolutely.
were you sort of, you must have been excited that you get to kind of dip your toe back into that sort of the light comedy and the action realm that, first really brought you, at least to my attention.
No, absolutely. I think one of the great attractions of Ant-Man in the whole Marvel world was the humor, and I was very attracted to it. And then obviously Peyton's twists on it and Paul Rudd's additions really brought it home. So that was a real treat.
Now, after armies of alien invaders and killer robots, was it nice to sort of return to a more kind of modestly scaled, kind of very grounded picture? It reminded me in a way of Iron Man 1 in that regard.
Well, it's the first sort of pure single hero origin story we've done in a while. And it was very intentional to slot Ultron and Ant-Man in the same year. I've talked a lot about last year we had Winter Soldier and Guardians. If we're going to do 2 a year, moving to 3 a year in the next couple of years, they need to be different. And really putting something the size of Ultron and something, pun intended, the size of Ant-Man in the same year seemed worth doing. And the response now that people have seen Ant-Man is great, and it seems to be benefiting from how different it is from a lot of our different films, but in particular Ultron.
Now, can you elaborate a bit on the I guess a bit of disdain that Hank Pym has for, or at least distrusts, the Stark family? That was one element of the movie that I really liked, is that, we're so used to, the other superheroes kind of, having criticisms of Stark, but they have it this sort of pointed, this sort of distrust. Can you talk a little bit about that element of it?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things about the movie. As a kid who grew up reading these comics, Henry Pym was one of my favorite characters. He's a complicated character. So to have Michael play that character is a dream come true, and we really wanted to take advantage of. He's got definite opinions about superheroes in general and the Starks in particular. He takes a couple of pot shots at the Avengers in the movie, but it's really fun to have that sort of character who was such an important part of the Marvel Comics history. And for me to be able to introduce him to the Marvel Cinematic Universe was really exciting. And part of that reason was that he's a very different flavor in that world, and he's got definite attitudes.
Let's talk a little bit about doing it as at least the opening part, not a spoiler. We've seen some footage in the trailers, but there is a period element. At what point did you guys settle on we're gonna at least have part of the story set in the past and determining which era to set it in? I was expecting the 60s. And so when it was the 80s, I was like, ooh, this is
Well,
this
it
is my
made
speed.
it made sense for a number of reasons. It made sense sort of in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, how do we place Hank Pym, you know, with Howard Stark or Peggy Carter or some of the other characters, and blend him into the existing Marvel Cinematic Universe? So the timeline just made sense in that way. And it was also important because he's the original Ant-Man. So we wanted to get just a little bit of flavor of that Ant-Man in action, and we treat it sort of almost like you would Bigfoot footage. You know, there's footage like, wait, what is that in the frame? Let's zoom in, and there it is. But it's you know, it's important to sort of have he's the mentor character to Scott Lang, the new Ant-Man. But you know, it was fun to sort of just see glimpses of the original Ant-Man in action.
And I did like some of the musical cue callbacks. There was almost this sort of Henry Mancini kind of vibe to the end credits music that I was like, ooh, I gotta get that one. That's pretty cool. Now, you guys on a visual level, you know, I believe you're calling it macrovision, the way that you pulled off the actual Ant-Man effect. After macrovision, after performance capture, what is the next sort of big visual or visual effects frontier Marvel has to conquer? I mean, you guys have done a lot already in 7 years, so what would you say is?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of, I expect a lot of cool things coming up, particularly in Doctor Strange, which we start filming in November. But for the longest time, the answer to that question was Ant-Man, was the notion of spending time down in that tiny little universe, and then even taking it further as we do in this film to a place called the quantum realm, which gets very trippy and very strange in a way that, pun intended, leads us to Doctor Strange.
What was the most interesting thing you learned about ants making this movie? Because I understand there was quite the ant school going on. Right? Anything in particular that jumped out at you, maybe you didn't know about ants?
Well, I mean, just the varieties was incredible, and I just thought it was just brilliant how they were incorporated. You know, again, it was, you know, to legitimize, you know, character definitions on real factual information between your working ants, your killer ants. I mean, each of them had a very legitimate choice. And you know, for me, as I just saw the movie for the first time last night, you see this macro world, and it's unlimited. You know, I mean, the choices are unlimited. Particularly, it's nice to be a superhero and have an entire army behind you. You know?
I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed there's not a Marvel branded like ant farm thing that you guys did. It seemed like such low-hanging fruit, you know? But
You never know.
never know. See, I just planted the seed
You
right
never
there.
know.
Ho, ho, ho.
And farm.
Now, from starting with, you know, Jeff Bridges to Hopkins, now to Redford and Michael Douglas, there doesn't seem to be any sort of like pie in the sky limit to the actors that you can get to show up in a Marvel movie now. Do you have sort of a wish list of people like you just want to, you'd love to see join the MCU someday?
Well, Michael was on that list for many, many years, and it's one of the great pleasures of working in this universe that we get to keep sort of crossing these names off.
Yeah.
There are a few more. Of course, there are a lot of amazing actors we'd love to work with, but I look at, we did a press conference yesterday and look at this cast. A couple of months ago, we did it with the Avengers 2 cast. It is incredible, and it's probably the highlight for me of being part of these movies, is working with and getting to know the unbelievable actors and people I've admired for so many years coming into this, and trusting us that there will eventually be ants there, or they'll eventually, Paul Rudd's helmet will look cool, and that means a lot that they are willing to. Certainly, people of the caliber of Michael are willing to trust us to go through with it.
Have you had the same casting director for a long time? For your
Sarah
company?
Finn has done, yes, every movie we've made since
Wow.
Iron Man 1.
So that's pretty impressive,
She's
yeah.
astounding.
I'm just saying, someday Daniel Day-Lewis will be MODOK. We know that's coming. There's nothing pie in the sky anymore. There's nothing you can't do. Peyton, you know, there was clearly a lot of expectations and anticipation for this movie, and you know, you definitely had huge challenges for on a visual level. I mean, I don't believe you'd ever actually worked on a picture with that many effects before.
No, not at all.
What ultimately is some of the biggest lessons you as a filmmaker are taking away from your time on Ant-Man, and sort of like what would you like to challenge yourself with next?
Well, it was amazing to work, you know, with the team of visual effects artists on this movie. I think there were 1,500 visual effects shots in the movie, and the goal was to two things really: make it seem as photorealistic as possible, to really, when Ant-Man shrinks down, have the audience shrink with him and really experience what that would be like. But the main thing is it's always got to serve character and story,
Right.
and I think that's a key to what's been so successful about the Marvel movies, is that, you know, character comes first. And Ant-Man, again, it's I think a much more intimate movie, particularly in the context of the other Marvel movies. It's really about family, and it's about fathers and daughters. And Scott Lang, Ant-Man, his primary goal in the movie is, I just want to be a part of my daughter's life again. And I love that as sort of a different storyline for a Marvel movie.
Well, I do love that there are sort of patterns of kind of parental issues kind of peppered throughout the Marvel movies, whether it's like Thor and Odin or Thor and Frigga, I believe I'm saying that right. See, I got my nerd cred.
Nice.
You know, but that was the thing I think I responded to, even beyond all the adventure of it, was the father-daughter stuff, because you see a lot of father-son stuff in movies. You don't see, there's not a lot of like father-daughter movies. That really struck me. Was there the casting of Evangeline Lilly? I mean, that's a very key role, because you have to believe her as a scientist, you have to believe her kicking ass, and you have to believe that she can kind of go toe-to-toe with Hank Pym.
Yeah.
What were sort of the qualities that jumped out at you about Evangeline when you were casting?
Well, I think Evangeline can do it all. I mean, you know, she's a very strong woman, and it was important for us, you know, in the movie. Hope's arc is every bit as important as Scott's is. I mean, it's the whole success of this heist in the movie is really dependent on Hank and Hope repairing their relationship. And, you know, I think one of the other fun things about the movie is, you know, Hank recruits Scott Lang. But really, if you take a look at the movie, you know, the solution to his problem was right under his nose the whole time. And part of the movie is him sort of becoming open to the idea of her. You know, he's really sort of, because he wants her to be safe, he really cares about her and loves her, but he may be holding her back a little bit. And it's all about sort of him letting go and repairing that relationship so she can figuratively and literally spread her wings.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this particular portion of our Ant-Man interview. We're going to have a spoiler chat with these folks, but let us know in the comments below any other thoughts you had on the movie. For all things Marvel, all things Ant-Man, keep it here on IGN.